All right, and I apologize. The timing always works out. It looks like there's lawn people are here at the office. So hopefully, well, I'm going to mute myself shortly anyway, so the background should be around. But welcome to the today's uh, webinar. Um, just another example, not only of the benefits of being a member, in case in the information that you get directly from us, but our associate members. I can't stress enough the value that could help each and every one of the regular members, so to speak. So we are fortunate enough today that Laufer Group International was able to help us. And there are obviously a lot of questions out there regarding the tariffs and what entries are going to look like and the like. And we are fortunate today to have Ashley Coxey with us. She's the National Director of Business Development Customs Brokerage for Laufer. And she brings a wealth of experience to the company's consulting team. She's been with Laufer since 2019, and she leverages her nearly 15 years of U.S. customs expertise to help clients navigate the complexities of international trade. As a key member of the firm's consulting team, she focuses on identifying potential risks within the client's supply chain and developing strategic solutions to boost both compliance and efficiency. And just a pre-thank you to Ashley and her team for being with us today. And with that, we will turn things over to Ashley.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. As Bob mentioned, I'm Ashley Coxey with Laufer Group. Happy to be here today. And thank you to AFI for hosting. I know tariffs are a hot topic for everyone as you continue to make supply chain adjustments and attempt to prepare for 2026. But I also know a lot of us are kind of tariffed out, right? It's in the media, it's in the news, it's everywhere. So my goal today is not to go through every nitty gritty tariff update. They're endless, and that would take up all of our time together. But my goal today is to touch on the tariffs overall at a high level, but focus more on the real day-to-day application for you as the importer. I'm sure a lot of what I will say today will be repeat information. You've probably heard or read it in some other format, but I hope the way that we present it today will help provide at least one nugget of new information or some sort of food for thought kind of takeaway that will help you in your business operations moving forward. Please submit questions in the chat box throughout the presentation. My colleague Alex is on and he'll help me organize and answer a few of these as we go, but we'll also save time for Q&A at the end. Most likely there will be questions that I can't answer here live, but I'll work with Bob to ensure that we follow up and provide some answers after the fact for anything that's left open. And questions about specific scenarios or specific products will probably need to be addressed offline. Oops. Oh, there we go. Those specific questions will probably need to be addressed offline due to the short time together today, but we are committed to helping you through those and conducting that follow-up activity. The content provided in today's session is as up to date as possible. There were new tariff updates that came out on Friday night, actually. Unfortunately, as we all know, things are still changing very rapidly, so bear that in mind. This is time stamped as of right here, right now. We may even get some updates as we're talking today. And the commentary and the slides are for informational purposes only. They are not considered legal, trade, or U.S. customs advice. We always recommend working with a trade attorney, your customs broker, or a customs expert regarding your specific scenario. So with all that being said, I apologize for the camera not working, but the presentation is the important part. So let's jump right in. Okay, so this is a little bit of an overview of what we'll be going through today. So we'll just start with, kind of an active tariff overview talk, and then we'll dig in a little bit on determining your tariff exposure, some mitigation opportunities. I have slides on each of the active tariffs that are in place right now. We'll skim some of those and we'll look at some of those depending upon kind of what's relevant, right? But I left everything in here. So since you're getting a copy of the presentation after the fact, if you have questions on something else, all of the information is provided. But we won't spend any time at all on automotive, furniture, trucks, etc. And then we'll finish with what's on the horizon. Go ahead, Alex. So this is a not so pretty picture of all the active tariffs right now. So there's different mechanisms with which the tariffs were imposed. So Section 301, IEPA, and Section 232. Down there at the very bottom on the right, there's the new China tariff that was announced on Truth Social. Nothing firm on that yet, but I put it on there because I know it will be a hot topic. So you look at this and say, of all this, how does this relate to me? What does this mean for me and my products? And that's really kind of what we want to jump into today. So go ahead, Alex, to the next slide. So, determining the effective tariff rate of a particular product is the crux of everything, right? So, your base duty and really everything beyond that is determined by the product's HTS code. And then your additional tariffs will come from the country of origin, material content, the actual tariff classification itself, that HTS code. And then sometimes even the product's end use is factored into that. And that's how you add in everything that's applicable. And really, you need to do that in your inventory product by product because each of them may have different additional tariffs applicable to them, even if they have the same country of origin, right? Exemptions. It's always good to think about any exemptions that may be available for the product or for the country you're importing from. So we'll go into that a little bit more. And then on the right side of the slide here, you see other considerations. A lot of focus right now is on the additional tariffs, but anti-dumping, countervailing, quota, all of those regular things you need to consider still apply. So don't let those kind of fall by the wayside either. A few little notes down here. Section 232 duties, those are by annexed HTS codes. So just because your product has steel or aluminum in the packaging, for example, does not necessarily mean you pay 232. The tariff classification for the product must be on the list. So that's a really, really good note. We'll look at that a little bit more. Country of origin is not necessarily where the item is packed and shipped. So US Customs has very specific rules for country of origin determination and reporting, and those need to be taken into consideration here. Tariffs don't change that, right? That's a US Customs rule separate from any tariffs. We'll talk about commingled product with multiple countries of origin. We'll talk about adjusting HTS codes, country of origin, declared commercial invoice value, and how that impacts your duty outlay, your duty spend, and that tariff exposure. Go ahead, Alex. So here is how the tariffs stack. So base duty is, like I said, determined by the HTS code. Section 301 duty always applies if your item is on that Section 301 list. IEPA fentanyl always applies if you're coming in from one of the countries that applies to. And then we get down to that bottom row there where you get to your and or tariffs. So if IEPA reciprocal applies, you see there all the way at the left side, then Section 232 does not, vice versa, right? So some of these don't all stack on top of each other. They're either or tariffs. So if Section 232 applies, you don't pay reciprocal. If Section 232 doesn't apply, you do pay the reciprocal. And then there's a few other kind of nuances in there. If you break out the value, then both apply, but to separate line items. We'll get into that, right? But it's always important to remember the stacking rules because that's how you'll determine your overall tariff exposure. So go ahead and go to the next slide, Alex. So here's an example tariff exposure worksheet. Very, very simple. We have product 1, 2, 3, 4 as our yellow, product 5, 6, 7, 8 as our green. You can see product 1, 2, 3, 4 has reciprocal tariffs that are added there because Section 232 does not apply. Okay, so that's when your reciprocal applies. And then from China, you can see the additional Section 301 and the IEPA fentanyl, where you don't see that from India, but you see the IEEPA Russian oil applies to India. That's based upon the country of origin there. And then for the EU, they have the compound reciprocal rate. So the base rate of that product is 8%, which means your reciprocal is 7% for a total of 15%. Now, on product 5, 6, 7, 8, none of those reciprocal rates matter because the Section 232 for steel and aluminum is applicable. So that 50% goes in across the board. And then for China, you still have your Section 301 and your IEEPA fentanyl. So I recommend doing this kind of exercise for each of your impacted products. This is really how you're going to get your total tariff exposure, is going through this column by column, line for line. And we've been working with a lot of clients to do this kind of exercise. Or if you're thinking about a new product or looking at a new country of origin, this kind of exercise is really helpful to do to understand that total tariff exposure. You can go ahead, Alex. So here, more importantly than those percentages is, what can I do to mitigate some of that? Right? What can I do to bring my tariff exposure down, to reduce my landed cost, to combat some of these extra expenses? And there's a few strategies here. These are what we'll talk about today is very high level. So once again, we always recommend walking through your specific scenario with a customs expert, but hopefully you'll get something here that's maybe some good food for thought. So step one is always to confirm and validate that your tariff classifications are the most correct. If you haven't looked at your tariff database in 5, 10, or at this point, even a year, it's worth taking a look because everything beyond that is determined by the classification itself. Evaluate your material content. Could you change some material, reduce something, eliminate something superfluous that would get rid of Section 232 tariffs, gets rid of that steel and aluminum? Or does changing the material content change the classification itself? Sometimes that's the case, right? If you change the material content, you get into a different classification, and then your tariff exposure is calculated totally differently. Always be thinking about your country of origin. With the reciprocal tariffs now, you could see on that last slide how it makes a huge difference in your total tariff exposure depending upon where you source from. And then, review the product specifics contained in your tariff classification, once again, for an opportunity to maybe shift that classification to something else. Obviously, that's legal and correct, right? Something that's more correct might be available. And then there's always the availability of special tariff provisions, free trade agreements, value reduction rules. So think about those kinds of bigger picture things as well. Alex, you can pop to the next slide. And here we start talking about a few of those. I would say first sale is a buzz phrase right now. Everyone is talking about first sale. So if you have a multi-tiered structure, I would absolutely recommend analyzing first sale to see if it's something that might benefit you. First sale, what it does is reduces your commercial invoice value. And anytime the value you're reporting to customs is lower, no matter what the tariff percentage is, your overall duty spend is lower, right? 10% of $10 versus 10% of $2. Those are very different numbers, right? Dutiable versus non-dutiable charges. I know there's questions about Incoterms and if I ship under X, Y, or Z, FOB, CFR, etc. What does that do to my duty outlay, my tariff spend? And that comes down to declaring dutiable versus non-dutiable charges on your commercial invoice. So there's a specific list of things that US Customs has broken out that is absolutely legal and appropriate to separate from your product value. International freight is one of them. So if your overseas supplier is bundling that cost into your product price, that declared commercial value on your commercial invoice, you absolutely want to look at separating that out because that is a non-dutiable charge. Okay, so that's a great strategy there. And then, of course, always consider exemptions that might be available. Some of those are called out, overall. There are some that are specific HTS codes that are listed in the annexes for each of these individual active tariffs. So, really making sure that you've kind of explored everything and read through all that might be available is really helpful. And then, once again, on the next slide, sorry, Alex, go ahead. On the next slide here, we talk about country of origin too. That's where the free trade agreements come into place. Now, a free trade agreement may not eliminate all of the extra duties, but it will at least get you a break or eliminate that base duty rate. And something is better than nothing. So always consider that as well. So here we just go into a little bit more kind of examples on questions you could be asking yourself or your suppliers or your product development team to think about some tariff and some origin engineering. What I want to highlight here down on the bottom left is when it comes to Section 232 for the steel and aluminum, I know that that impacts you all in packaging. Be sure to break out each material weight and that value on the commercial invoice. If you have something that only 10% of it is steel or aluminum, you don't want to be paying that 50% on the total value of that product. You can break that out on the commercial invoice so you're only paying those duties for exactly what you need to. In addition to that, can you utilize the manufacturer's purchase price of that metal content as your price paid or payable on the commercial invoice value? Really interesting way to think about the one step back pricing for that material and declaring that price on the commercial invoice. That you need to have a very transparent relationship with your supplier, with your manufacturer to understand what they bought that for. Likely they're purchasing that packaging, right, to put your product into. You can use that price they paid. You just need to be very careful with that, right? Customs has a close eye on undervaluation. Everything needs to be able to be substantiated with a type of claim like that, but certainly something to look at. And then once again, country of origin. Can you source it from anywhere else? Is there a free trade agreement available? And then we talked about product specifics. Could a better description be provided that would allow a different HTS code to be utilized with a more favorable duty rate? We see folks using very general product descriptions all the time. And being more specific can lend itself to saving you some money. So keep that in mind. Go ahead, Alex. So here, the next section gets into, I've got a slide, like I said, on each of these tariffs. So we'll focus on a couple that are important and relevant, and we'll skip over some others. The only thing I really want to say about Section 301 is that there are a few specific product exclusions that are active right now. Those expire November 29th unless they're extended again. Okay. And then what you see on the right side of the screen here is this is not, none of these are new. This list has been out since 2024. These are scheduled increases that have happened or are happening in certain sectors for Section 301. So something to keep an eye on there. Go ahead, Alex. IEEPA fentanyl is a countrywide tariff that applies to Mexico, Canada, and China. So if you're importing from any of those three, it's important to understand the percentages are all different. So that percentage will apply unless you have an exemption, and then stacking rules apply as well on that one. Go ahead, Alex. IEEPA Russian oil. So this applies to all imports from India. Stacking rules apply with this. There was an in-transit exemption. So if you have product coming in from India, hopefully you were able to utilize that before this 25% went into play. And that does stack on top of some of the other tariffs we're getting ready to talk about. Go ahead, Alex. IEEPA Brazil. So this is a 40% tariff on all imports from Brazil. There was an in-transit exemption, and there were some specific Commodities excluded. I called those out here. And that's, like I said, 40% that's active. Now, go ahead. Okay, reciprocal tariffs. I think this is where we're going to spend a bit of time. These are more complicated because they're different by country. And then there are certain special agreements, right? Japan and the EU have that compound rate based upon our special agreement with them. So if a country is not on the list, 10% global tariff across the board. And then countries that have higher than 10% are called out. On the next slide, I've got the percentages there. Stacking rules apply. So these go into effect in addition to the other tariffs you're paying. China is their rate is at 10% right now. That's on pause until November 11th. It's scheduled to go up to 34%, although we know from recent announcements that it may be even more than that, right? So we'll see. Go ahead to the next one. So here are your rates by country. So if you see the country you import from on this list, this is the reciprocal tariff rate. Now you see the EU and Japan are broken out. They have a little bit of a more complex formula, and we'll get into how that works on the next slide too. But this is always a helpful reference. So anytime you're thinking of a new country of origin, quickly reference their reciprocal tariff rate to see we have a savings of 15%. And then you go here and their reciprocal tariff rate is, 39% in the case of Switzerland. That may change your sourcing decisions a little bit here, right? Go ahead, Alex. So here, there were a few questions that came in ahead of time, and I wanted to kind of address those. So the EU agreement specifically calls out paprika, saffron, capers, and kiwi fruit in the Annex 1. So they are exempt from reciprocal duties. They are specifically called out as being exempt in that annex that was included with the implementation of these tariffs. So they are not subject to that compound rate of 15%. They are only subject to that regular ad valorem column 1 duty rate. And those I've listed there in green. So that's good news for those specific commodities. Reciprocal tariff rate determination for commingled goods. This is really interesting. And this goes back, I'll say everything stems from US Customs rules of origin, their marking requirements, their declaration requirements. So, how you are determining the country of origin for the product itself, tariffs aside, will really be the driver in how you report that to customs and what tariffs are assessed. So, that being said, US Customs has published a ruling on tariff classification on country of origin marking for mixed nuts, that each country must be present on the product label and declared on the US Customs entry. So that's a scenario where the nuts come from different countries and then they're packaged together. Each of those countries where the nuts are grown needs to be outlined there. Now, when you have something like, I know the question about olive oil came into play as well, that's blended together. You can't discern the the various countries and which part came from where once that oil is made and packaged. So that may be a different story. So looking at the US Customs rules for country of origin will be how you determine which country or which multiple countries you're declaring on your excuse me, commercial documents when you're bringing those goods into the country. So it's not a straightforward answer. It's you've got to go back, look at the product itself, look at the US Customs rules for country of origin determination, and then once you determine how customs wants that country of origin reported, that's how the tariffs will apply. So it's a bit of a 2 or 3 step process there. And it gets very complicated, right? Because their rules of origin were not made with tariffs of different types from different countries necessarily in mind. Go ahead, Alex. Any questions come in yet that I can answer? Uh,
No questions yet, Ashley.
okay, perfect. Feel free, guys, to drop anything in the chat. Steel and aluminum. I think this is another one that's interesting to you all. And again, complicated application. So these started out in March at 25%. They've since been increased to 50%. So you're looking at, except for country of origin UK is still at 25. We do have a special agreement with them. So that's important to note, right? These tariffs are not based upon country of origin. They apply across the board, but they apply to specific products. So it's important to know that your product, even if it contains steel or aluminum in it, is not subject to these tariffs unless you're on the list. At this point, there's multiple lists. There were 407 new HTS codes added in August, and that covered over 700 new derivative products. So derivative products are not raw material, steel and aluminum. It's things that you all would be impacted by, right? Those are what they consider the derivative products. So there is another tariff inclusion process open, which closes tomorrow. So folks have submitted, I think it's about 100 HTS codes to be considered to be added to the list. Those are reviewed, and if they're approved, we could see additional products added to that Section 232 steel and aluminum list by the end of November. So just because you're not paying tariffs on something now doesn't mean they might not catch that product in the next round. So it's important to know that, there are 4 times throughout the year that there's a comment period open, and those can be added to the list. So you're not safe if you're not paying it yet. It can always be added, unfortunately. Go ahead to the next slide.
All right, Ashley, we do have one question here about the 232s.
Yep, and I think that one will be that'll be addressed here on the next
Gotcha. All right.
slide. So let's pop that up. I just saw that come in too. Thank you, Alex. So this top bullet point answers this question here. So products subject to 232, unlike all the other tariffs we've reviewed so far, can be reported with a split value on the commercial invoice. So this is extremely beneficial when a product is on the 232 list, but it's a really small portion that's actually steel or aluminum. In your case, most likely something in the packaging, right? So beer in aluminum cans is like the most classic example, although we can think of anything that comes in a can. And tin lined is considered, it's tin put over steel. So if you have tin content and you are on your tariff classification is on the steel list, you are subject to Section 232 tariffs. So this is really, really important to understand so you don't overpay. So you report the product in 2 lines. So we would say, here's my beer. It's being imported in an aluminum can. Here's the potential tariff classification for that, depending upon the size, right? That's what you see there, 2203.00.0060 or 90 under or over 4 ounces. So then you would report the value on the commercial invoice in 2 lines. So you would include the value, commercial declared value, and weight in kilograms of the aluminum itself, by itself, and Section 232 tariffs of 50% will apply to that line. Underneath that, you would then declare the value, commercial invoice value, and the weight in kilograms of the beer. And then reciprocal tariffs will apply based upon the country of origin associated with that product. So that's how you would break that out. So you're not overpaying that 50%, because many countries, as we just saw, actually almost all of them, the reciprocal rate is lower, typically much lower than 50%. So you don't want to pay 50% on the total content of your item when your steel or aluminum is just the packaging or a component of the packaging, right? So this is the key right here. If there are further questions on this, please feel free to put them in the chat. I can go into a little bit more detail or provide some examples offline or something like that. So let me know if there's more questions about that, because this is really, really important here. Valuation is extremely important. So you want to be careful to not, because you're able to split it out, that you're not undervaluing the metal component. There are valuation strategies to reduce your declared value in a downstream transaction, which we went over, right? Using that manufacturer's price on your commercial invoice is legal. You have to be able to prove it, right? Customs has a really, really close eye on undervaluation. They are holding cargo, examining cargo, issuing fines and penalties, and kind of investigating importers for undervaluation. So you want to be really careful, but there are things possible here, right? To reduce the duty spend if you do it all on the up and up, so to speak. And then once again, a product that contains steel or aluminum in the packaging does not necessarily pay Section 232. You have to have the tariff classification be on those annexed lists to be subject. So I have seen importers tell me, hey, I've got steel in this product, or the packaging for this product. What do I have to pay? Well, their tariff classification is not on the list, so they don't. So double check your tariff classifications against those annex list. And then once again, new derivative products can and will be added by the Department of Commerce throughout the year. Okay, I don't see any other questions on 232, so let's go ahead. Automobile and auto parts, we're going to go past this, but this information is here for your reference. Copper, I don't think it applies, but if it does, you've got the information here. You're welcome to ask me some, more detailed questions if you need to, so go ahead, Alex. Lumber, timber, and furniture shouldn't apply to you folks either, but if it does, here's the information on this. This is a pretty new tariff, right? It just went into effect October 14th. So it just, the conversation about tariffs, this presentation used to be about 10 slides, and now I think it's close to 30. So the conversation just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And these sectoral tariffs, the Section 232 sectoral tariffs, more sectors are under investigation and being added every day, it feels like. So go ahead to the next slide, Alex. Heavy trucks. This is an update that just came out. You can see the date there. White House official notice posted on October 17th. So that was Friday night. These are effective November 1st. Once again, just more tariffs coming. You can go ahead to the next slide. Pharmaceuticals. You can go ahead to the next slide, Alex. It does appear that that's on pause. So this, a couple weeks ago, we had a busy Truth Social weekend where the president announced a new 100% tariff on products imported from China. He did state that this is over and above any tariffs that are already in place. Now, how will it be implemented? Will it be a change in China's IEEPA reciprocal rate? Will it be an entirely new tariff itself? Not sure, right? So that Truth Social post didn't contain that level of detail. And then there was another post on Sunday said, don't worry, it will be fine. And we haven't heard anything since then. But it's clear we've got some tension going on, right? China has put in some new export controls, and that this tariff is in retaliation to that. So it will be really critical to kind of keep an eye on how things go in talks and meetings with these two countries prior to November 1st. That's when the scheduled implementation, or that's when the stated implementation date was announced as. Nothing is scheduled. There has been nothing official posted. But we put out, I put a link on here so you have it. We put out an update when this came through the Monday morning afterward. I try to send out updates on things that we hear over the weekend or just general information. All of those that information about tariffs and customs related market updates we post on our insights page. So there's a link here just as a resource for you all to go and view that post if you'd like, or keep an eye on additional tariff updates as they come through. If you're already on our email list, you may see that as well. Go ahead to the next slide, Alex. Okay. What else could be coming? This is, unfortunately, there's still quite a list, right? So we talked about the Section 301 exclusions expiring at the end of November. Brazil is under Section 301 investigation. That started over the summer. China's reciprocal tariff rate outside of this new announcement was already scheduled to increase on November 11th. But we have seen some country specific rate decreases through trade deals, right? We saw that with the EU. Their trade deal came in a little bit later. There's still opportunity. Any of those rates that I showed on the screen, those could go up or down, hopefully down at any time. The only two deals that are really like inked are Japan and the EU. So lots of opportunity for trade deals with other countries. We'll get into the court case as well, but there is a court case challenging the use of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, stating that it's an improper use, it's an illegal use of that mechanism to impose tariffs. So if you've paid reciprocal tariffs on these goods and those tariffs are deemed to be unlawful, there's an opportunity to get a refund if that case yields a positive result for importers. So we'll get into that. Like I said, additional Section 232 investigations are underway. There's a list on, I think BIS has a list of all of the sectoral investigations that are open and the status of them. Russian and Venezuelan oil tariffs. So the Russian oil tariff is active on India right now. That could always be expanded. A tariff on countries who buy Venezuelan oil was also announced via executive order a few months ago, and no start date was given, no operational instructions. It didn't actually go into effect, but that's kind of floating out there too. So that could be something, an additional 25% that could come into play pretty much at any time. So something to keep an eye on. And then the last note on here, increased U.S. Customs holds, exams, and penalties. Like I said, Customs has a really good finger on the pulse for this undervaluation stuff, manipulation of country of origin, where folks are sending goods to warehouses in third-party countries and having them, there's no additional manufacturing, no substantial transformation made to change the country of origin, but then they're declaring that they have and really just kind of changing the country of origin label or sticker on the product itself. All of those kinds of things are very high on Customs radar. We have absolutely seen an increase in customs holds and exams. And good actors are getting through, right? But the targeting has increased an amazing amount. So air cargo is definitely subject to that increased scrutiny, but we're also seeing it with ocean cargo as well and containerized freight. So something to keep an eye on if you have goods that are, really hot, high priority, and you expedite them. Still factor in time for a holder exam. Even if you haven't had one in years, we are seeing customers that, even CT PAT members and things like that have a squeaky clean record still going under hold and exam because they've expanded the targeting so much. So really want to make sure that you all have that consideration there. And then if you're engaging in any of the tariff mitigation opportunities, that you have the paper trail to back that up. So if Customs questions your valuation or questions your use of first sale, questions your breakout of those dutiable versus non-dutiable charges, you have the paperwork and the paper trail to back that up and prove to them that you've done it correctly. Have that all in hand ahead of time so you can provide it quickly and get your cargo moving. Go ahead, Alex. Okay, the IEPA litigation. So this is a really, really big deal if you've paid any IEEPA tariffs, which I'm sure if we were in a room and had folks raise their hand, everyone could say they've paid IEEPA tariffs on something. So they first came into effect in February, and then they went to court in May, and the Court of International Trade ruled that the tariffs imposed under IEEPA were unlawful. So everyone on May 28th was emailing me, great, tariffs are gone, tariffs are gone. No, unfortunately, even though they were ruled illegal, that decision was appealed by the US government and a stay was granted. So tariffs are still in place. As we all know, we're still paying them, right? So that's why, is that the decision was immediately appealed. So after the Court of International Trade ruled them unlawful, that was appealed. They went to the Court of Appeals actually already, August 29th. They also ruled the tariffs illegal. And once again, a stay was granted and the tariffs are still in place. So what's really important is that the case is now headed to the Supreme Court, and they've agreed to hear it on an expedited basis. So you can see down at the very bottom is where we're at here with this. Response briefs and reply briefs are due this week and next week. And oral arguments, the actual case being heard at the Supreme Court, will be the first week of November. So a final ruling on these tariffs could come as soon as late November or December. Why this is important is that if the Supreme Court rules the tariffs to be illegal, first of all, there's no way to appeal that, right? So the tariffs will go away. And we could see that as soon as November or December, which would be a huge immediate relief, right? To get rid of reciprocal tariffs, get rid of the IEEPA fentanyl, get rid of the IEEPA Russian oil and the Brazil. So that would be an immediate relief. The issue is that the court, it's not within their purview to grant a mechanism for refunds on already paid tariffs. So that will be up to the importer, you all, working with your customs broker to identify each and every entry that has been impacted, that you've paid reciprocal tariffs on, and to request a refund based upon the determination of the Supreme Court that those tariffs are illegal. That would happen via a post-summary correction, a PSC, or a protest. And you file that with US Customs and then essentially have to kind of get in line and wait for a refund on each and every entry. So that part would be a pain. The immediate relief would come when you wouldn't pay tariffs on anything new that's coming in. Great. But the going back piece is a bit more complicated and will absolutely take evaluation of your import activity from February 1st, right when the tariffs went into effect, all the way to present, figuring out which entries have liquidated, which haven't, what your tariff exposure is on that, what the refund possibility is, and then making those filings, those post-summary corrections or protests on each of those entries to get that money back. So huge opportunity there. And the Section 301 litigation drug on for years. So this one being heard on an expedited schedule is really, really good news. And this is the schedule. So keep your eyes and ears out starting the first week of November. And we'll see if we have a decision before the end of 2025, we could start 2026 with no reciprocal tariffs. Maybe that's a little too wishful thinking, but I'm putting it out in the universe. You can go ahead to the next slide, Alex. So that's all I have for scheduled kind of content presentation wise. Once again, this will be sent to all of you. There's a lot of detail in here, but I just really wanted to kind of high level cover it, try to grab some of the nuggets, give you things to think about, some takeaways, maybe to go back and kind of research a little bit more. I'll be available. I'll make sure Bob sends out my email address, my direct email address. If you want to follow up with me, you can funnel questions in there. So that's I think we've got, oh, I see one more question coming in here. Feel free, drop questions in the chat. We scheduled this last time, or this 10-15 minutes here to go through. Purchased at a more favorable rate than the current daily rate. To honor that rate versus the daily rate when they convert in order to calculate the duties owed. So the duty that you pay is based upon the declared commercial value at the time of entry. So it's what's put on the documents. So when you make the conversion from euro to dollar, that locks that in. So that would be, we can probably discuss a little bit more offline what the specific scenario is, but it will all kind of depend upon your business practices as far as when you're doing that conversion in your own books and your own invoices. That would impact that. Chemical carriers mostly have been exempt under Section 301. Chemical carriers. Kevin, can you clarify for me what you mean by chemical carriers? You're talking about the Section 301 vessel, the vessel tax that's going into effect? Okay. Yeah, so the vessel tax is different than these Section 301 tariffs that we've talked about, and I'm not sure. I can check into that for you to see if what the status of those exemptions will be. Talk of exempting products that do not grow in the USA. Yes, so there have been some exemptions, like I said, made on specific tariff applications as they're implemented, but via Section 232, I'll tell you, IEPA, there's really no exception process. There's nothing established for comments, for exemptions, anything like that. But with Section 232, there are those comment periods for inclusions. There's also a way to request exemptions. Now, I don't think any of those have been granted up to this point with the new tariffs that went into place. But there is a process to request exemptions if it's a 232 tariff. If it's under IEPA, there is no exception or comment process. Okay, question coming in here about extension of liquidation. This is a great question, Stephanie. Thank you for bringing this up. So initially, we were advising customers to request the extension of liquidation on customs entries until there was a final decision on tariffs. That way, you don't have anything dropping off. You don't have to worry about your protest window, all of those kinds of things. But we have not seen those requests being granted. And customs has actually advised that they will not grant liquidation extensions for IEPA reasons because it's in litigation. The legal piece of it, they can't touch. They can't answer questions about IEPA tariffs. They can't answer, they have FAQs out there. They can't clarify anything. If the word IEPA is involved, U.S. Customs cannot comment on it or take any action at all. So originally, and initially when the court case was going on, we were advising customers to extend liquidation of entries from the very beginning of these tariffs. But we have not seen that be successful and have been advised that they actually can't and won't do that because of the legal nature of that case. So unfortunately, you just have to keep an eye on those liquidation dates. Now, I will say if you have something that's already in the protest window, so it has already liquidated, you can file a protective protest where you can say, hey, I want to reserve my rights to amend this entry pending the outcome of the court case. So that would be my recommendation. In lieu of being able to extend your liquidation, keep an eye on those liquidation dates and file protective protests on the entries that you need to, only on the ones that you need to between now and when the ruling comes out. And if you'd like to talk more about that, shoot me a message and we can talk about, kind of best practices for some of that. But protective protests is the better route to go, since we know now they're not extending liquidation. Looks like that's all the questions I've had come in. Bob, is there anything else that came to you on the back end?
No, I didn't see any more come in. I did, as you were talking about the extension process, that's exactly what I've been hearing.
Yep.
So it was good to, as with everything else you covered, to hear that we're hearing the same thing. So that's
Yep.
good. And one other note on the IEPA exception process, I'm on a trade committee, and several times they have mentioned, and this is people within the U.S. Trade Representative's office
Yep.
and the like, and they have said the president has no interest
Yes.
in any sort of exception process.
Unfortunately, yes. And
Yeah,
there's
the
no
way
there's no mechanism
that's right.
available within that tariff application, whereas it's built into section 301, it's built into section 232. It is not built into IEPA, and this is all speculatory, of course, but that is
Right.
one reason people are saying he chose that route, is because there's it's unilateral sort of implementation without question.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, terrific. It doesn't look like there's any other questions. Ashley, and Alex in the background there, definitely want to thank you for an excellent presentation. A lot of information on there presented in a way that made it a lot easier to understand.
Good.
We greatly appreciate it. And we will, it takes a day or so to turn around the recording, and we will have that plus the slides. And then we will share Ashley's contact information with you. And we will try to keep everybody updated and go from there. So thank
Thank
you
you so
all.
much, Bob. Thanks everybody for the time. Really appreciate it. Sorry about the camera not working, but you got the meat of the information on the screen anyways. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody. Be well.